to see you again. Thanks for coming. Good. We're going to get started here. Okay. Welcome everybody to our first Friday Property Abandonment and Housing Development meeting. My name is Nate Howard. I'm the Executive Director of the Muncie Land Bank. It's great to see so many people here today. Turns out Colby's a big pull here in Muncie. No, a lot of people were promoting this. A lot of people got to hear Colby speak at the IDEA conference, and so some of that promotion just happened amongst people that got to hear him speak. I want to say we normally have food here when people arrive. That's actually not true, but we normally have food. And hopefully they arrive very soon, and I would just say you just kind of go over as you like to get your food. It is a bit noisy in here, the echo, but just kind of, if you can, quietly slide over, get food. It's really good whenever it does get here. Thank you, Carly Mad Jacks, for always letting us use this space. This is great. I love to start out by, we got a lot of new people. So I'd love to have everybody, if it's your first time, or if you haven't been here in a long time and you want to say something, introduce yourself, tell us what you would like about yourself. Anything else. So I'm just going to start over here. And we just got new people galore. I love it.
I'm Trey Luttrell. I'm a transplant from Maine thanks to the Make My Move program out of Indianapolis, but I'm starting a budding handyman business.
And you're a makerspace member at that.
And I'm a makerspace member at Magic's because it is the best place.
Right on.
John Caldwell, pastor at City Home Fellowship, and which incidentally used to be in this room way back in the day, probably five years ago or so. Yeah, and also a little bit of a handyman on the side.
Great. Thanks for coming.
I'm Wiki. I'm married to Tim. I'm here because I've lived in Muncie for a long time and care about it. We both have degrees in architecture, so this is sort of like something we've been interested in for a long time, but have been drowning in children. So I can come.
Did you study at Ball State?
Yes.
Okay. And where are you originally from?
I grew up in Anderson.
Okay. Okay. Welcome. Okay, let's keep going.
I'm Sarah Mitchell from Wayne County, Richmond, Indiana, and I'm here because we are starting on an innovation in our community, so I want to learn more.
Awesome. Welcome.
I'm Megan Bonnett. I work at Muncie Habitat for Humanity, so I'm just here for my first time checking it out today.
Welcome.
I'm Hans Heinzelman, my survey today. I'm not so convinced we have a housing crisis as much as we just have houses that need worked on. I think we have a lot more to do in rehab in our community and many communities than we really need more new housing. That's my opinion.
I'm Tracy Letzler from Rushville. I graduated from State in 2008. This is my first time here. I'm on the market tap room. I'll be ready to open hopefully soon, but just here for information.
Welcome. Welcome.
I'm Magnus Lang. I am a long-time Midwestern, born and raised here, went to Ivy Tech, and just here to hear the information.
Welcome.
I'm Paige Brown. I work at the Community Foundation, and I saw this talk at the IDEA conference and came again for the sequel.
I'm Kim Miller. I'm a local business owner, and I'm also involved in a lot of stuff, including the East Central Neighborhood Association. So I'm coming here because it's a topic all the time about as the city's changing and neighborhoods are growing, what's that look like for each neighborhood. So.
Welcome.
Craig Johnson, I'm a community volunteer, and I'm familiar with land bank, learning more and more and more, and I really admire what you do. And I'm passionate about Carbon Greenway. I'm on board there, very passionate about that. And Colby's, he's relevant, so I wanted to come.
Welcome.
Brian Ayers, I'm the CEO of Oakwood Health Services, personal and professional interests in having improvements.
Welcome.
My name is Tiger Long. I got invited by Neil. I was just hearing that he attended the last presentation. Was told how good the presentation was, so I was just here for the first time.
Welcome.
I'm Molly Shaler. I started here as the director of the Makerspace and the artist studios up here just this week at Magic's. And I'm really excited to learn more about the land bank and get to know everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Any other newbies?
I'm Scott Messler with Eco Rehab. I'm also a local insurance agent, but I'm excited to see all the Eco Rehab ties that we have here. Also a fellow Eagle, so go Delta, support the Eagles. And I saw this presentation at the IDEA conference, and it was just a little teaser. So.
Technically, I guess I'm going to be here too. I'm Mary Beth Lambert. I run a little company called Your Private Gardener. I'm here to listen to my buddy Colby, who I think has been amazing since he was on a football team at Delta and got flatland resources, and I'm just excited to get to hear what he has to say because it's always brilliant.
I'm also new. My name's Kylie. I am a board member of the South Central Neighborhood Association, and I also am a habitat homeowner. So I'm personally invested in my neighborhood, and I missed this at the IDEA conference, so I've been looking forward to hearing it.
Welcome.
I'm Nora Powell. Represent District 2 in the City Council, but I'm also my neighborhood association president. You kind of talk about my neighborhood at the next August conference, presentation at the IDEA conference. Excellent. So I'm back here to take more notes.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Well, I would be missing a really great opportunity just to say hi. I am Carly, I'm the executive director here at Mad Jazz, and we love having First Friday here and having Muncie Land Bank as a resident in our building. And Colby has played a really interesting role and a very important role to the livelihood of the makerspace on the first floor, and as his all-state cap. And so as you leave today, there are some really cool projects on the first floor from BSU's College of Architecture and Planning students this semester. And so we'll always love a chance to put more eyes on those things. They are very interesting, made up lots of interesting material, and tell great stories. So they're on Main Street, or kind of towards Main Street, and then down the road. And just wanted to say thanks for spending some time in our building today.
Thank you, Carly. Anybody else? Anybody else want to say anything before we move into the program? Okay. Again, apologies, food's not here. Just feel free to get up and grab some as you like. Before I pass it off to Colby, I just say that, so this space, we've been doing this now for, I think our first meeting was in October of 2023. And there's a couple different spaces like this happening in Muncie, and I feel like this kind of getting people in the same room to listen to interesting topics, things that are happening elsewhere. Some of it's happening here, right here. But the Land Bank loves to be a space where we convene people and get people listening, thinking together. And a lot of times we don't have a prescribed kind of aim with when we hear these topics. What we hope is that this can be a space where things start to emerge, that people from different perspectives come into the same room, listen to something, and it potentially moves forward in different creative ways. So this is something we do every first Friday of each month. Always welcome. Food's always late, but it's really good. So that's all I've got. Colby, I'm going to pass this mic off to you. And I would just say I didn't get a chance to hear Colby speak either at the IDEA conference, but again, people were raving about it. It's like, let's use this space for that. What I do know of Colby is that he's very sincere, and there are a lot of people that will just kind of a new idea, and it's something new and innovative, and so it's kind of like a soapbox. But what I know of Colby is that this is something that he cares about. He cares about Muncie, and he believes in, and he's sharing this not because he's trying to position himself as an expert, but because he feels like it's something that he can contribute to our community. That's what I've been able to perceive the time that I've gotten to know Colby. So, pleasure to have you, Colby. So we'll just start, and then you can field questions afterwards. That's normally how we do it. Some people might ask a question during the...
Sounds great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And golly, that was a very kind introduction, and I appreciate the support and encouragement that so many gave to me. I don't know, this doesn't happen every day, so I just want to say thank you for that. As many of you know, I'm here to present a kind of a story about our community here in Muncie. It's maybe a little bit atypical than some. It's not necessarily about the great sports teams that we've had over the years, or the great philanthropists and leaders of our community over the years, and all those kind of stories that we talk a lot about, the golden age maybe of our community. It's about infrastructure, which is probably something that sounds pretty boring and something that we don't think a whole lot about until we hit a pothole and have to get rerouted on a detour or something, right? But the core of it really is going to kind of talking about the pipes, the roads, the buildings, the drainage, things that, again, we don't think too much about, but they're kind of like a physical record of like how our community started and how it grew and ultimately where we're headed, right? And so we're just going to take some time to kind of wade into that and talk about that, okay? Cutting to the chase though, a little bit, my thesis, you're going to hear it quite a bit as I talk, is that as a community, we're overbuilt, right? We have way more infrastructure, those pipes, those roads, sidewalks, stuff than we can really afford to maintain with our current tax base and our current population. And that's like a hard conversation to have, right? It's one that we can't really ignore, and it's also something that's not going to happen overnight to fix. It's a long-term horizon, okay? A lot of times when we talk about many challenges we face as a community, as a region, as a nation, there's lots of different types of topics that some of which are hard. You might need advanced economic modeling and a specialist to interpret that, or special instruments that you have to calibrate. But the thing about our physical infrastructure, it's like you and I can go with a tape measure and a wheel and walk around the neighborhoods, and we can agree, like what we're seeing, what's on the ground, and we can use publicly available tools like GIS information to kind of capture and understand all those things, and it shouldn't be that much of a debate, really. We can ground truth it in the most meaningful sense. So it's slightly different in that regard than some of the other conversations around our challenges. And I am going to talk about it from a perspective of challenge, and I'm not going to try to sugarcoat anything. But I do want to mention here at the beginning that the physical infrastructure of our community isn't the only variable that makes a good community, right? You could have the most beautiful streets and sidewalks and everything, and you could have a lot of struggle in these other dimensions like social dynamics, social experiences, economic issues, cultural things. Like you have to have the complete picture to make a good community, and I think that our town actually has a lot of positive things going for it, even though I'm going to be kind of harsh on the physical infrastructure side. Is that fair? Is it like a disclaimer? Yeah. And again, any good town has to have a combination of those variables, and we can evaluate those, okay? However, and we've seen some of those variables change even in the last 70 years. There's been a lot of improvements in the way that we relate to each other through social justice. Economics can shift through major federal policies and changes. We can see impacts of that pretty quickly. We can re-elect new government officials every so many years and get big change that way. Obviously, stories like John Craddock and Phil Tevis and their efforts on the White River has really improved our ecology and our sense of relationship with that. We can see that over time. Cultural, spiritual revival can happen pretty quickly, and if it's bedded in the right ways, can be sustained. But physical infrastructure just isn't so easy to put back in the box once it's put out. Right? It's expensive to lay into the ground, to bury these pipes, to put these roads, and then once we do, it's just it's like a timeline before they need to be repaired, before they need to be maintained, be basically rebuilt in the shell of the old, right? So there's a lot of maintenance. They don't disappear when the people who make those changes leave and go on to other things. They outlast administrations, all that sort of thing, right? And so, again, just mindful of all that, we're gonna kind of wade into discussing those things from the perspective of, hey, it's not all bad, but we do have some real challenges to face. Okay, so just a little bit about me. I do have some background from some different schools and kind of urban environmental planning. Worked for 10 years here in the local community in different capacities. I've lived in Bloomington, Indiana for a while, which I think is a great example of a good downtown, adjacent streets and neighborhoods. Lived shortly in Boston, Massachusetts, and some of the old historical areas of those communities. traveled just enough to be dangerous to know that, hey, some of these traditional urban forms are things that have stood the test of time. And so I guess I have a little bit of a bias towards those things, towards those sorts of spaces, and that'll probably come through a little bit in the presentation, okay? So again, we're going to talk a little bit about our patterns. We're going to talk about some of the financial implications of those development patterns and what we can do going forward. And I don't know if that was enough of a disclaimer to kind of frame things. Let's go ahead and just kind of jump right in. So as a reminder, we're talking about primarily like streets, sidewalks, curbs, roads, right? This is the public domain. These are things that we have to ultimately maintain through our tax base locally, right? We do get some funding that comes in through the state and federal, but largely it's kind of our community's responsibility, okay? Obviously, on top of those physical things, a lot of other services run and operate, okay? So this is a picture of Muncie in, I think, around 1887 or something, okay? I just wanted to point out a couple things as we get going here. Here's the White River, right? So that was probably like the furthest extent north that the community had been built. We're looking south here. So the Ball Brothers mansions would get built here, and it would literally be like country mansions, right? The Delaware County Fairgrounds would have been in the county, right? And pretty much all the development would have been up south to the railroad tracks, okay? So if we think about that time period, this is before the automobile. You had to be able to walk downtown, you had to be able to walk to the rail stations, everything had to be compact, and you had to be able to move throughout your community primarily on foot or horse or buggy, that sort of thing, okay? The discovery of natural gas kind of changed things overnight for Muncie. A lot of East Coast businesses like the Ball Corporation moved here to take advantage of that resource. A lot of regional producers like the Kitzelmans moved closer to Muncie so they could take advantage of the rail systems. I think for the Ball Brothers in particular, Muncie was a good location because they could get sand from the north and plenty of timber and coal from the south of Indiana and kind of get it shipped here. Overnight, we added like 25,000 people. Okay, so it was a big kind of surge of industry that came here. You can see this map from 1913. It was still pretty tight, to the railroad track, but we've certainly expanded south. Okay, a lot of those developments built by the industries that kind of came in here to create housing opportunities, etc. But I guess the key thing I just want to mention that this is still pre-automobile, still a need for a lot of walkability to kind of get around the community. During the war years, the World War I and World War II, there was a lot of retooling of our industries to support that, and a lot more work came and a lot more people showed up. So another 25,000 people moved in this area by the around 1940s. And you can see the kind of the red boundary here, very minimal outward expansion, right? So high density, 75,000 people kind of in a footprint that was relatively small by where we end up headed. Okay, it's there's a little bit of effort here to try to identify just the urban parts and look at how many people are living just in the neighborhoods themselves, but it's easy to get to these numbers. If we take the old West End as it is today and assume that count every single parcel that's there, had a large house on it, which most of them did. Household size at that time was closer to like 6 people per household, and then you start to do the math. It was a much different neighborhood, in terms of density. I mean, some of the population density projections would put it like very up there at 25,000 people per square mile. It would feel like you might live in old parts of Boston or New York today, in terms of corner stores. You have to walk downtown to get your groceries. It's just your people walking to school. Just a totally different old West End than what we have today, right? Downtown, here's a scene of Muncie in the 1940s. It's kind of hard to believe. I mean, like every single parking lot, would have had a 2 or 3 story building on it, right? Like the lovely experience we have walking down Walnut Street and see that sense of enclosure, nice articulated facades, streetscape level entry would have been like almost in every, major road as you walk around, right? Again, just a different community, even though it's ours. I mean, I think this was from a parade, so it's a little misleading in terms of the density there, but you can kind of get a sense of that. But this is even a picture of Cannon Commons, right, looking south on Walnut Street, and it just, at one point in time, this is what that view looked like, right? Just a different city. And of course, for better and for worse, like this is not a diatribe against the automobile or anything, but the automobile radically changed our culture in so many different ways, for good and for worse, I mean, it happened, okay? And certainly by the 1960s and 70s, we're talking like every household has at least one, right? And you can imagine all of a sudden now we have this very, this downtown scene here, and we're just literally dropping giant metal objects everywhere, right? I mean, it's like the spaceship has landed type of deal. Like, I can't imagine what that would have been like, right? Especially there was no I-69, right? There's no bypass. Like all regional traffic going to Hartford City, to Newcastle, to Winchester, Anderson, it's all coming right through downtown, You can imagine why they needed to build the kind of high-speed ring road that goes through there, why all the one-way streets got kind of built. On top of all that, think of all the commercial areas we go to and we buy goods and services would have all been downtown, so everyone's going there, right? I can understand why things shifted in a way, right? Why we went to more of a kind of low-density landscape where people could drive their cars into big parking lots and walk into buildings, right? There's just, that tension had to have been there on some level. So obviously we're very familiar what our experience of what McGallard looks like today. Along with that, of course, is for that relief of that density came the suburbanization of the United States. And this was facilitated in many ways by federal housing policies and federal road policies that kind of, just radically changed the way that people lived and worked and commuted and all these sort of things. It just sort of happened, right? And so if you think of Muncie prior to World War II, you kind of have this sort of footprint, and then there's a clear expansion to the northwest, right? And here, even if we look at household units per acre, I mean, there's almost equal amount north of the river to the west than there is, to the south of the river, right? So, essentially, just even after that time period, we almost built a whole new city next to the old one, right? And we can go into some of these slides. I'll kind of slide through quick, but the population density and change has shifted around over that time, and some of that's also driven by the fact that those ring roads, the bypass, and some major roads were developed. I mean, if you can get in your car here and in 10 minutes make your way all the way up to northern Delaware County or beyond, it's like so easy to get to places when you have these big roads and multi-lanes traveling 55. Those things weren't around, in the 40s, right? So we build these, this again contributing to the change, right? And years later, there's downtown Muncie looks completely different, right? A lot of those buildings are demolished to make way for the parking lots. Some of them were because they were, I don't know enough, I can't tell the detail. I know there's a combination of repair costs versus, demand versus vacancy, all that sort of stuff, okay? So again, and definitely into the 80s, like we added another 25,000 people at one point in time. but the footprint of our city functionally has expanded now to 3 times the size, right? You'll hear me talk about this a lot. I'll probably mention it again, but there's this idea in planning called range and threshold. It's like how long are you willing to drive to get like a basic need met, like to the grocery store, to maybe to work or to, there's a certain economic threshold you're willing to drive to just get something simple like a gallon of milk or something. You're not going to drive all the way in to do that. You're not gonna, So you start following. You can kind of predict these patterns that we live in. We all kind of live within a 5 to 10, 15-minute bubble. So even if we all are in the same community of Muncie, we may never even see each other, because our patterns are just kind of going in these tight things. So sometimes when I think about our community, the political boundaries are almost like arbitrary. And I hate to say that in a way that's offensive or anything, but like people who live in Yorktown or northern Delaware County, I mean, we're all in this together. Like we're working at we're working at Ball State, we're working at the hospital, like this whole economic zone here is what I'm talking about when I refer to Muncie a lot of times. Just kind of putting that out there. And so what you have ultimately over that period of time is a radical drop in the density to the point now where the Old West End has about the same amount of people per square mile as a typical suburb in like northern parts of the county, right? So it's just a kind of a big shift, okay? All make sense? Okay. So I want to transition a little bit and talk about how we kind of got to this point, and I want to use a couple examples to maybe illustrate this concept of what's called carrying capacity, okay? So as I mentioned before, there's so many people that are kind of living and working in this sort of economic area that we're calling Muncie, but it's really kind of Delaware County, Yorktown, northern Delaware County. And there's a quantifiable amount of individuals that are kind of in this range and threshold. And we can also anticipate through basic census data how much household income we have, what's the average amount, how much of that's going towards housing, how much might that be going towards health care, just kind of rough numbers, right? And so everyone, on average has a certain amount of money that they might have for disposable spending or basic goods and services. And that's kind of quantifiable too, in a way, right? And we also only have so much time that we can go to different places to shop and to do things. So in my little story here, when we talk about the automobile era and the emergence of McGuire, and the mall obviously is a good example of this, right? So when the mall was built, the footprint of the mall in square footage is almost exactly the same size as like Walnut Street, right? From like the courthouse to the roundabout, right? And at that time, almost all the major commercial areas were on that strip, okay? So when they build the mall, and we have carrying capacity, and you only have an hour of your time, and you only have so much money to spend, we all kind of had to make a choice of which one we were going to go to, right? And what ended up happening is that the mall sort of won out over the downtown mall, okay? And that kind of makes sense in a way to me. But what ends up happening later, and even into the 90s and in the early 2000s, is that economic development just kind of continued as like a mindset. And for example, we with our local dollars, built a ring road around the mall, and you can see all the green areas is the amount of square footage that got built afterwards, and we can kind of add that up, and it's the exact same square footage of the mall, right? And in many instances, like a Dick's is an anchor store to a mall. You can think of Kohl's as a sort of an LSA, or like a Macy's type. I mean, even Target's kind of rebranded over the years as like a find anything store, like a Sears or something. It's like this area is actually really vibrant economically. I mean, the movie theater used to be in the mall. Like a lot of those stores now, that's from TJ Maxx over to Shoe Carnival, like these are all kind of mall stores. You know what I mean? And so I mean, this is just a good example. Like, we can't sustain the mall and the second mall we built next to the mall with the same amount of money, the same amount of purchasing power that we have as a community. Okay, and this kind of segues into the same thing with housing, right? So if we have a certain amount of houses that we need, you know, there was a certain period of time where there was a relationship between the real estate value of the land and the housing structure that was on top of the land. Okay, so for example, I really want to live downtown because I want to be able to walk to the stores, I want to be walk to the neighborhoods. I might be willing to buy a home that needs a lot of repairs, and the person might be willing to sell it because they could get a lot of money for the land, and then they could buy a new home, and I could get a home, and I could repair the home or build a new one on top of it, right? That sort of like cycle goes away when all of a sudden place doesn't really matter anymore, and you could live anywhere and drive to where you need to go. Kind of make sense? So then when all the cornfields become sites for construction of new homes, then housing gets kind of separated from community, place, walkability, and all these sort of things, and it becomes more like a commodity in the sense that, like, we build a new house now in a cornfield, and when it starts to deteriorate, or maybe it starts to show signs of wear, a new home buyer might be more willing to just build new in the cornfield next to it instead of buy that home and repair it, replace the bathroom, just do the kitchen and right? So it kind of creates a challenge that's been identified by others where homes start to just become less about place and about rehabilitation and more just like new construction after new construction after new construction, and that creates a consequence. Okay? We see that consequence in our community, right? If we're constantly just building new homes, divisions, new home divisions, the energy, the financial and economic power that's being used to build these new things aren't coming back and rehabbing the old, right? It's just not. It's the carrying capacity issue, you know. Unless we're going to dramatically increase the amount of people that are coming in, like, we're just kind of moving, drifting, right? And we're seeing that, and we see the impacts of that, right? There's large, that map I showed you of that sort of 1887 boundary, right? That was like the first wave, right? And when we built the neighborhoods next to that, Riverside, you know, we keep building out. Each subsequent wave is going to get a lot of pressure of not having that redevelopment force in play. Okay, and a lot of these areas, if you drive around and kind of just like see it visually, like intuitively, you know that's true, right? You could just see the building and say, wow, that needs a lot of improvements to the roof, to the facade, to the porch, to all these sort of things. And those numbers show up a lot with the vacancy. We have close to 6,000 to 7,000 homes that we believe, based off Postal Service data and census data, that are just totally unoccupied. We have a higher number that's even considered transitional rentals, meaning like they're for rent but they're not occupied, right? And we have even a higher percentage that people just own on paper but they don't really live there, right? And that number is pretty large, right? And we can kind of see these patterns show up looking at it from different types of perspectives. On the ground visual assessments, which Ball State students have done over the years, and kind of yes or no, like needs repair, doesn't need repair, and then we can also see it kind of show up in the assessed values. Okay, so in a way, that area of our community that was the old historic urban core, we kept building out in all directions, and if there's not enough population to come back in, it's obviously a perpetual challenge. Okay, in fact, if we look at census data, we can see the White River, and this was from like 2010, so it was looking from 2000 to 2010. Like the red blocks here is kind of like the donut around the old historic core, and this shows like long-term tenure. right? If you've lived in the same home for more than 10 years, right, where is that located? Okay, and so you can see that even on the south side, on the west, on the east side, that outer ring is where most long-term homeowners live, right? And the other thing that we'll point out with some of this data is that some of this is continuing to spread and drift to the northwest even to today, right? So again, if we drive around certain types of really historical neighborhoods, we can kind of maybe visually see that it needs a lot of repair and structural upkeep. But also, if we drive around neighborhoods now that are on that first wave of suburban development, we might not necessarily see it visually, but if we look into the assessed values and compare them from 1970s to today, there are certain neighborhoods that are declining faster than others, and that can be teased out from the data, okay? I kind of sometimes I'll come back to it as an example, the neighborhoods west of Tillotson, so Ball State, Tillotson, west of there. Housing assessed values high, like if you go to try to buy a home there, it's going to be, I don't know how you compare today's housing market to the thing, but it's higher. It's going to be still higher. But if you look in Zillow and look at the pictures and everything, you can see pretty quickly that there's a lot of dated bathrooms and you start thinking, I got to pay for that too, right? So now the house became even more expensive, and now you're thinking, well, maybe I just want to buy a new house somewhere, right? And that neighborhood, I think, is one that's kind of primed for that sort of challenge. Okay, and I'll come back to that. Again, some other perspectives on this sort of housing-related issue is looking and thinking through the issue of Ball State's enrollment patterns. So, after the GI Bill, there was a big surge of people that started to go to college, right? Here at Ball State, we got a big uptick into the 70s, but from that point on, it's been relatively flat, you could say. I don't think the community was ready to account for the amount of students that came into our community pretty relatively quickly, and that's one reason and factor why Riverside became largely a student rental neighborhood. Okay, and so obviously that changed the character of that neighborhood in a lot of ways. After that became a surge of apartments that were targeted to the Ball State students in that same area. Okay, so now the highest concentration of apartment units, are largely in that Riverside University area. But then also in I think it was the late 2000s, there was a surge of new student housing development that occurred north of Burl King and the Linda Brook Plaza to something like 3,000 to 4,000 units, I think, up there. And so then this sort of trend sort of continues, right? So now a lot of the students that lived in Riverside moved up to that northwest area. A lot of residents that lived in the community at large moved into Riverside, and that sort of movement just kind of continues, right? And we can see that pattern resulting in more rentals, more vacancy, more availability, and say like some of the historical urban neighborhood, urban core, right? And again, this is largely not because of population decline or industrial departure or any of the other things we sometimes blame for our challenges. This is because we just incentivized and built new, like instead of rehabbing and restoring what we had. Okay. And so again, we're kind of seeing that pattern show up. And if you read the news or hear a lot of times, I guess I don't hear as much as more, but there's still this background sort of like cultural mantra that if we just keep growing, we're going to solve all of our problems. But let's just play that out for 1 second, right? Let's say that we're going to add 20,000 people to our community. I guess that would be good. I don't know if it matters. Maybe. But what does that sort of look like? Well, first of all, we need to lure 7 employers the size of Ball State and Baltimore Hospital here, right? So that's a challenge. But then if people are trying to move here and they're following current trends, like it's very likely that a lot of them will want new homes, right? And so, okay, we can do the math, figure out that's going to require about 6,000 homes, about 1,500 acres. And if we follow the current patterns, it's probably going to get built up here in the northwest corner or even in Yorktown. And the point is like that's not going to solve any of our infrastructural liabilities or issues that I've been kind of talking about, right? It's going to continue that hopscotch development, and it's going to keep marching. And ultimately, some of the people that live here are going to move here, and some people move right. And we're just sort of, we're not really accomplishing, I don't think, our goals when it comes from a maintenance and affordability perspective. Okay. Still holding everyone here? I know it's a long presentation. Okay. So unfortunately, the exact same thing's happening in the commercial realm. Okay. So you can see here, all the commercial areas used to be concentrated in downtown, and now it's spread out into that donut shape I showed you earlier, right? About this is where all long-term tenure residents, this is where the commercial is. Okay. If we take the commercial areas that are zoned and then get the building footprints and then calculate how much square footage all those buildings are, this is just kind of, it's kind of rough kind of math to kind of talk about this. We have, I'm going to skip through some of this. We basically have 66 square foot per person, where standards nationally suggest more in like the 20 to 30. And this is before like Amazon deliveries and all these other things. So a case could be made that we have 2 to 3 times more commercial space than what we need. Right, and again, like this is just good information to have, because sometimes I could be driving around, and this isn't a picture from Muncie, but sometimes I could be driving around and see like unoccupied commercial spaces and think to myself, oh, like our community, like no one wants to be here. We're on the decline. Like, but no, we just have more than what we need technically. I mean, it's like we have 3 abandoned kind of grocery stores, but the 2 that have come in recent memory build a new one, and we can't figure out how to make it work. And as a result, I think I watched the mattress store get built right next to the old mattress store, and it's that's the market at work, right, or whatever. But like it still like doesn't necessarily deal with the externalities of that, and we have to look at it and live with it. Right? So sometimes it's just a matter of trying to talk yourself out of it, from an economic point of view. I mean, going back to our variables, like I feel like there's everything I would need in this community to be able to get to and purchase and buy, and it's a good place for that reason. But when we have to kind of wade through a lot of just kind of I hate to call it, but like kind of architectural like waste that hasn't been dealt with, it kind of dampers a sense of quality of place, right? And again, this is kind of like this speculative and data driven, but like if we take all that extra residential property I was mentioning that's either abandoned or vacant or not for rent, and kind of compress it down into a unit of acreage, and do the same logic with like the commercial areas that we think were overbuilt. It's just interesting that the square footage and acreage almost comes out to be the same size of that early community, that we just kind of built next to and didn't deal with it. And all these things ultimately come back to, what the kind of core message is that this results in a lot of liability for us as a community, right? So, and to make matters worse, I guess, not only did we build another city next to the old one, right? But the city that we built costs more to maintain, right? So like when we have homes spread out 3 times further, right? And there's a concrete, we still we still have to pave it, we still have to put the sidewalk in, we still have to put the street lights on, and now all of that is costs more because it's more spread out and it has, right, more space, okay? This is just an example of a suburban development. I think it's in Riverside. You can, okay, this is a gravel road, gravel alley, gravel, but then these are paved, right? And you have quite a bit of homes. We count them up. I can't remember off the top of my head how many are in the same green outline. But a new development today might have the same amount of square footage, but less people that are living there and contributing to the tax base. And even more asphalt and concrete that has to be managed long term as a resource and liability. Okay, and this sort of plays out like in some of our road data. Now, so many years ago, I don't remember what it was. I almost didn't believe it was possible, but I guess now with AI and machine learning, I guess it makes sense. But there was a company that video recorded all the streets in Muncie and had like algorithm or whatever, like analyze all that footage and rate all the roads and give it a score. So in like an academic sense, our roads were graded as a whole like a D rating, right? And the unfortunate news was like, to maintain the D rating, we need to be spending like close to $5 to $10 million a year on our roads to maintain that. And if we wanted to increase it to a C or a B, we'd need to spend close to like 20 million a year or more, right? And like our annual local road budget, I think, is like 1 million. Okay, so that's just like a challenge, right? And I'll show you some resources I created that can help us think that some more. But it's significant, and that's just for the roads, right? That's not the curb appeal and the sidewalks and the signage and the street lights and all those things add up. I mean, there was a study we did a few years ago where we wanted to look at maybe what would it be like to just repair all the sidewalks that connect downtown to Ball State, in the Riverside neighborhood or something. And it was something like, $11 million, to do it. To do it right, and that's almost all of like the city's disposable income, if you want to call it that, from edit funds, or it's like asking all the foundations to pay for that, and no nonprofits get any money for like a year and a half or something, right? So it's a challenge, right? And this is not like a challenge that couldn't have been forecasted. Like entropy has existed for all human history. Like we know that everything deteriorates, this can be planned. Like we know that roads need maintenance. We know that homes need rebuilt in the show of the old. We know that, what I mean? And we know it seems like it speeds up with like appliances nowadays, but even in our own home, we can kind of project that we're going to need to be making repairs. And for some reason, we seemingly haven't really been thinking about that for the last 100 years or something for some reason. And this isn't just Muncie's problem, by the way. Like this shows up in almost every major community across the United States. And a good example, an unfortunate example here, is that all of us have been slowly paying into the stormwater fees and sanitary fees and everything so that we can build up enough money to spend $300 million fixing our legacy storm sewer systems. And the biggest area is parts of our community that that is part of that trend. And so even something like that, I mean, why not spend the $300 million and build brand new homes that are targeted for the right cross-section of demographics, and then instead of repairing all the infrastructure there, transition that to green space or forest or something else. It's like, I don't know, sometimes it's hard to try to think outside the box, but that's just like a good example of maybe an attempt. So just again, kind of a recap on this kind of section. And hopefully I try my best to illustrate it, that some of these challenges are visual. We can see them if we drive around certain parts. There's a whole nother wave now that are emergent, that are harder to see, but they show up in the data in terms of housing values. And there's a concern that if we just continue to build that next wave, right, that we're all going to kind of suffer from it, and certainly in the process of that, continue to build more and more infrastructure that our tax base can't simply afford. And again, not only that, we're doing it in such a way that's more costly than typical housing has, typical communities have built throughout history. Okay. And just, like another quick thing we generated recently, I mean, we're talking like a significant drop in density. And this was just an interesting study that just showed that like you and I today are responsible essentially with our tax dollars to pay for like 2 times as much roads than residents in Muncie did in the 1900s. Okay. And I guess for one second I want to put on my soil and water hat, think about agricultural lands. Every time we do this, we're losing farmland, which is our economic engine, and the world isn't making a whole lot more of it. I mean, it takes many, many years to build the soils that are needed to grow food, and on top of that, farmland generates the most, or historically, generates the most taxes and requires the least amount of services. So we're swapping a land use that helps support us with a land use that will never pay for itself over the course of its life. Right. Okay. So that's the kind of the core of the talk that regards about this sort of issue with infrastructure, how we got here, some of the issues and challenges associated with that. Now I am going to share a few some observations and thoughts about what are some of the things that we probably could do or need to do to kind of set maybe a new future into motion, but I want to emphasize that my major goal, and where I'm hoping to make some sort of a contribution here is to get more people to think about the problem, right? Because we all ultimately have to agree that that's a problem. I mean, because if you can't define the problem, then there's no solution that's ever going to work if we're not on some level of agreement. You don't have to agree with everything I said, but I feel like we have to come to some sort of other people have to be able to see the exact same thing, say the exact same thing in a way, in their own words, in a way that makes sense to their constituency, all that sort of stuff, right? Like we have too much infrastructure, we can't afford to maintain it. Right, but if we get to that point where we're all, then that's where I think the real work begins. So like, what are all the different types of approach? Like, there's stuff I just don't know about. There's community precedences I'm not aware of. And I feel like that's where we move forward with everyone contributing their thoughts and ideas. And but I do want to just mention a couple real quick that I think are important. But again, I haven't put as much time into that as thinking about the issues. So the first one is creating more community dashboards that kind of help us understand this information and can look at it, not just in a PowerPoint, but on our own time, in our own homes, looking at things. So a case study that I made recently with the help of Zach, by the way, which taught the course, was a dashboard that kind of pulls in road data, pulls in housing tax generation, and kind of looks at like, okay, within this area, there's this much roads, this much road maintenance is required per year, this much taxes is being generated. So a quick example of this is and you can zoom in on different areas of this map, like this is that old 1887 boundary. There's 104 miles of road there. If we just do the basic maintenance based off the report I mentioned earlier, we should be spending close to $4 million, right, a year. Now we can argue about the numbers I used and everything, but just for contrast, only $2 million is being collected in this area, right? So, and that's just the roads. It's not all the other services that the city provides that taxes need to fund, right? And here's an example of the rest of the community again. Like it has this many road miles, it's generating this much taxes, but it requires this much road maintenance. Well, That's our entire, that's all, that means all the money that's getting collected is going straight to roads, and no other services are being provided. So even in both contrasting parts of our community, we're kind of up like in the hole a little bit with that. And we could do this sort of thing for a lot of other pieces of infrastructure that we have in our community. I have done, I'm not going to show it, but I have done one for the rural areas and the legal drains. Again, these are conceptual kind of dashboards that help people understand the issue and kind of explore that and kind of wrap their mind around it. I think we need more of them. I think we got to figure out how to do it as a community to get more people aware. The other thing I think we can do a better job at is financial modeling our future land use decisions. So, and this isn't something we have to create from scratch. I mean, other communities have done this sort of thing. So, like, this is an example of a certain housing development pattern. I kind of showed you an example: a big home on a big lot with with a road going through it. It's fine. But if you start to break it out, like the owners of these homes are going to probably need to pay around $1,000 a year, right, in order to build up the money necessary to make the subsequent road improvements over time. Okay. And if we start looking at patterns that are a little bit more close together, that number starts to drop. If we start kind of squeezing them together, that gets to around half as much, 400. If we start introducing mixed use apartments, townhomes, that drops even further, right, to the point where like this sort of development costs $53 per dwelling to maintain the same amount of road miles, and it makes sense, right? Hopefully, just like that's sort of the logic I feel like the community should be using if ultimately we have to figure out a way to pay for it. All right, and some of that can be done, and there's again case studies and examples of how that could be used. Maybe it's even during a planning commission review process. Someone comes forth and proposes a certain type of housing development. At least we can say this is adding to our net liability and it's not really helping us. But go ahead and do it anyway. At least, I mean, from a resident, I'd like to hear that, just so I know the truth is being acknowledged on some level. I think that as part of all that, thinking about the future, I think townhomes, which is probably one of the most historical, urban topology, has to find some sort of resurgence here in our community if we're really trying to get to the land use types and the kind of ratios where we can generate the type of taxes that we need to maintain our infrastructure. I know there's been some efforts recently to build those, and I've definitely, for what it's worth coming from me, I would encourage that. I don't know how to facilitate that, but I know it can happen through zoning reform, and it can happen through just policies that any type of cost sharing or private-public partnerships could prioritize townhomes or the other typologies. But those sort of dramatic changes that would have to happen aren't really going to do us much good if we can't stop the sprawl, and really, honestly, from a countywide perspective, Daleville and Yorktown and landowners all up down 332 and on I-69 are kind of in the driver's seat to decide if we're going to do that or not. From the city of Muncie's proper's perspective, so it goes back to the idea of who are we? Like, what is this larger economic region? Like, what does it mean to work here, to live here, from a county's perspective? And some of that, I think, is going to have to be resolved if we can really tackle, what it means to prevent sprawl. In addition to that, I think we're going to have to continue to find the areas of our community that have high density in some ways, or we really want to try to facilitate high density and try to figure out how to create local area plans. I prescribe to a theory that 10,000 people is the sort of upper limit to where you can actually have local governance and actually kind of know your community, and that you have enough people to be able to support a school and support all these other critical assets. There are ways we could break our larger county into units of 10,000, because I think what we'll find based off those driving thresholds and everything is like that is kind of like your space. And if we could figure out ways to think about all these issues through the lens of those individual nodes, we're going to find that each one of those communities needs radically different types of intervention policies. Like we can't just kind of blanket the whole county with a comprehensive plan that's super abstract and expect traction. And I know we do it at a neighborhood scale really well. There's been a lot of great effort through Ball State, building better neighborhoods, and through the urban planning department at like a sort of neighborhood scale, but we kind of need to get that intermediate level where we're also dealing with, kind of tax generation, economic, commercialized areas, and kind of think of that as like one comprehensive kind of piece of human community, right? And there's some case studies and some examples that I have that are frameworks for that sort of thinking. And in addition to that, like sometimes it's hard for us to accept, but the center of our community from a density point of view is currently not downtown, right? The highest concentration of people is obviously around Ball State itself because of the students. I told you north of Lindenbrook, even in the areas kind of on the edge of like Kenmore, like this is where like a lot of these nodes currently exist in terms of higher concentrations of people. And again, if we can't figure out how to infill like into those existing areas, then we're just gonna, I keep showing this slide, we're just gonna run that risk. So there's a couple places that probably aren't on people's mind, but like Lindenbrook Plaza is sort of disjointed. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of vacancy there, right? And if we just build more of it next to it, it's just, right? Like it's got to happen in all the different nodes, but that's like one of them to me that like, is there a way to create a place there somehow? I know that places like Carmel and everything are trying to reintroduce, create like more of like pedestrian level infrastructure and amongst like kind of more suburban type buildings and structures, which again is just like one thing, right, that we could do differently. I use the example of the constructions around the mall. That happened. It's likely that level of development would happen again at some point. And if we took all those buildings and stores and kind of put them more in like a proximity to each other and created a front door, front space between those that were more engaging, maybe that would be something that include mixed-use development, like housing with it. Like, there might be sites around the community where that could occur in a more intentional way. Obviously, close to my heart's downtown itself. I mean, it's got the history, the bones for that sort of thing, the historical neighborhoods that, that all surround downtown. I mean, another no-brainer to me. I mean, it's like you think about from the 1990s, all the housing suburbs that got built just then, what is the same footprint to completely have reconstructed and revitalized all the neighborhoods around. I mean, like this happened in our community. Like we had that energy and that economic activity. It's the same thing for all those development that occurred north of the Royal King area. It's the same square footage as like all of downtown if we just took that there and put it there somehow. I know it's just like really ambitious thinking, but my point is that we had that. Like we had that chance, right? And how many more chances to like wrangle something into place are we going to have before we just continue the march? Okay, and regardless, I do just want to say, I think some level of selective contraction would even need to occur, even in what I'm suggesting. Right? If we increase density into certain pockets and nodes in our community, unless we get people to move here from out of the region, it's going to be a continual relocation of our residents into places that like are more, community based, and so there's ultimately still going to be areas of the community that aren't going to have the same level of density and demand. And I think there's precedents across the United States of ways that, like, how can we facilitate that with absolute integrity and honor to the people that, are renting there or have lived there long term, and that's not an easy thing to do, and that's also probably a 70, 100 year process. But if we're not talking about it and thinking about how to do that in a way where there is a tremendous amount of respect, then again, we're just kind of conceding that we're just going to continue to sprawl indefinitely, and we're going to keep building challenges. But again, there could be ways that what's there and successful in certain historic neighborhoods could really be amplified and supported, where some of the vacancy properties, the parcels that that are acquired through the land bank or others could just become green space, or again, I mentioned before, even maybe productive lands from a forest management perspective or something else. Okay. So again, those are just like a cross-section ideas to think about. I think it's not a prescription, or it's not saying but these are the types of things that we got to begin to kind of think through if we're going to even propose anything different than just passive acceptance of this sort of northwesternly trend towards I-69. Okay, so again, my last and final words here is that this didn't happen overnight, right? This is a 70, 100-year issue. It's not going to get undone so quickly. But whatever solutions that we do propose or things that we move forward on, I think they're going to have to be rooted in this sort of kind of geospatial thinking, and has to be done in a way where like people feel like they get it, and it's like kind of apolitical in a way. But currently, I don't see a whole lot of trends. I mean, I don't see there's not a whole lot of modeling that's being done outside of in very sparing ways. I don't see any like restraint in terms of new housing developments and where they're going and why, and so I think we're currently just kind of continuing to march to what we've always done, and so that's always kind of just concerning. And we know that it's not really it's beyond not sustainable. It doesn't compute at all financially for our community to be able to continue to afford to maintain it. So, I mean, just some of the most low-hanging fruit is just to kind of get those dashboards going and develop some plans and trying to take advantage of the fact that the Planning Commission is going to start in July a look at our zoning policies, and I've talked with Kylie a little bit. I think it could be a great opportunity for the community to kind of get behind that, support that, investigate that, and maybe some of the things that we're kind of exploring here today could be incorporated into that in some way. Okay, and I do want to come full circle here and just say, like, yeah, I said some harsh things, and I sound really confident when I say it, maybe, and I could be wrong about some of these issues. But regardless about the physical side, I do think that there's a lot to be proud of our community when it comes to a lot of these other variables, and we can't lose sight of that in the process of trying to deal with the hard questions. So again, if I have a final word, and it's just like I said it a few times, say at the end, I feel like we have to have these honest conversations if we're even going to get serious at all about coming up with solutions. And obviously that's one of the great things that this group of people here is doing today with the land banks facilitating. So I just want to thank you for the chance to be a part of that conversation, and I'm excited about what could happen from here. So.
Questions or comments?
That was really good. I had lived in California for a long time and then live here, but in California, one thing that I think helps there is the geography.
Mm-hmm.
So like in the Bay Area, for example, we have the ocean, the bay, the mountains, and then in LA we have mountain, although LA has a big sprawl, but it would be bigger if it weren't for the San Gabriel Mountains and the Pacific Ocean, and then
Yes.
so here we don't have geography to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
So in Santa Barbara, where my husband's from, where he grew up, they're so anti-growth, and Malibu also so anti-growth, impossible to get anything built, and people are really critical of it. But at the same time, they're able to maintain. Like if you go to Santa Barbara, it's beautiful, and the houses are able to maintain their values,
Yeah.
obviously. So, but here we don't have geography or the anti-growth, so it just seems like it's just going to keep going out into farmland here, and nothing will stop it.
Yeah.
So do you advocate for, the only thing that really could stop it is for government to step in and be anti-growth like the way it is in Santa Barbara. Do you think that is possible here, or do you think that's just not something you want to talk about?
I hope that, I don't think you're doing that, but I don't want to be anti-growth. I want to be pro.
Well, not anti-growth,
Yeah.
but like.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I'm just trying to make sure I say it clearly. Like, I want to be pro, like, financially stable community. And maybe there's some growth that needs to occur in order to get us to that point.
Incentivizing, like, you're going to grow here and not out in the farmland. We're going to keep the farmland, and then here is where we're going to focus on growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't quite understand how we can continue what we're doing without really thinking. I don't know what the best way to frame it or terms, but.
Well, if like taxpayers realize that their houses are going to go down in value every time someone builds a new development, maybe that'll get them motivated because they want their houses to stay valuable.
Yeah.
But,
it's a challenge. I'm kind of skirting a direct response to the thing. Just because I wish, I mean, ideally I wish everyone could just see it, like, you know, it's so easy to say, well, that's an anti-growth mantra, or, you know, that's an anti-growth person, or something like that. Like, I just wish that people could just see, like, well, I want to contribute to, like, a great place. I want to.
Yeah, I know. So Rebecca Hanna was the one who basically told me to come to this through Facebook, and I'm so excited that I did, because this has never been presented to me in this way. I own 550 units in Muncie of real estate. That I rent, and in a lot of those areas you were talking about, and I never understood just how the city grew that way and why things are the way they are. And I just think as owners, as people in the community, like more people, I mean, I don't know if you can put this on YouTube, but like more people need to know about this.
It's gonna be on YouTube.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because I never even knew any of this, and not like I'm an educated person who cares. So maybe a lot of people just aren't aware.
Thank you.
Have you had this discussion on local government in Delaware County, and if so, how was it received?
I mean, I think it's only been. So I have given this talk at a annual event called the Academy for Community Leadership, and I don't know to what extent I've got local governments involved. I mean, there's a lot of turnover in local government, you know. I get it out there, and I always get a lot of people that find it interesting and intriguing. And this is a lot longer format than usually what I give, like 20 minutes versus like I think I went over. Sorry, Zach, like an hour and 20 minutes, something. So there hasn't really been a whole lot of that sort of long form opportunity to have long form discussions with with local government. I don't know if that answers your question, but I know I could be more active in trying to get in front of commissions and stuff like that, and periodically I do go and give truncated versions of this to the housing, committee and stuff like that. But I think sometimes it's the first time they've heard it too, and so it's like, who's this guy, And so I think I think it is, I've heard that you have to say it 7 times. My sister said you have to say it 7 times before someone even really digests something like this. So I just haven't had a chance to really do that.
You need a website though or something, because I tried to Google you ahead of time and there's not a lot about you online or what you're doing. I feel like we need to get a website going that has all this info where you can say like, okay, people, like here's the news.
I appreciate that. I think it would be better if it was a abstract thing that we could all get a part of instead of make it about me. But because I do mean that. I feel like we all have to kind of be ambassadors of this message in some way, you know. And it has to, you know. And we're all gonna say it slightly differently. You know what I mean?
I liked when you did, I mean, people are very critical of Carmel, but I like the part where I live in the Arts and Design District of Carmel. Okay, so I own a lot of real estate here. I live in the Arts and Design District of Carmel. It is extremely walkable. I bought my house there because I can walk everywhere.
Yeah.
I never even get in my car. I get in my car to drive here, which is what you were talking about. Yeah. But just creating that, they've done a really good job of bringing people to the downtown where they can live and work, and my next door neighbor can walk to work. It's very walkable, and I do think that that's like possible here.
I do too. And I think, you know, even that one slide, I try to use it as an example. Like, again, let's just use the cross section. You know, like you know, at the time of doing that one study, I just picked what's actually been built here in the last 10 years. It was like a student project. Like, just start with that. We know that it got built. We know that it's possible. You know what I mean? Like, for it to get built, it might not be, you know, the same types of establishments as in different places of the community, but it's ours. Like, we could have taken that and created a place in the midst of it. I think it's possible. I mean, it would be unique to us. I don't think we could just like copy and paste, you know, Carmel or anything or anyone. But it's about proximity. It's about you know, walking distance. It's about placemaking, and that's. I would hope that it would feel like Muncie, you know.
Have you seen with other cities or studies similar to the cities of Muncie, like what have they done to bring bigger corporations to Muncie?
I do know that I'm not too familiar with that, from that kind of perspective of economic development.
You just know we need at least 7 corporations.
What's that?
So you just know, like with your study, that we need at least 7 big corporations the size of Boston or Baltimore?
Well, I mean, I think I just use that kind of as an example. If we were really gonna try to get 20,000 people to move here, it could be other things besides big corporations, you know. But we would have to create a lot of jobs, you know. It could be a combination of big corporations and a lot of smaller ones. But I was just kind of using that as mostly to try to understand what would the footprint be if we built more housing to accommodate 20,000 people. So.
Then to your point, they just keep moving out.
Yeah.
I think it was very interesting, the data as far as with the density and how much of the maintenance burden is required by the properties as it becomes more dense.
Yeah.
And you had said, even if we're like, well, this is going to cost us much and we're going to do it anyway, I think just acknowledging that,
yes,
that's something that could be calculated. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy or whatever, but like, you did it, so like, it can be done, you can do it.
Yeah.
And that would be interesting information to have, because we constantly hear about building the tax base, but it's like a business that generates tons of, you know, their income is super high, but their expenses are this high.
Yeah.
We're making more income, but we have to spend more money.
Yeah.
And so when you look at infill, and say there's 3 houses on a block with existing infrastructure now, and I don't remember the numbers, but whatever, say it's $3,000, so each house is paying $1,000 to maintain that portion. When you put 5 in, you haven't really added anything.
Exactly.
So that it's cheaper per person to actually live and maintain.
Yes.
That is very interesting. And I think that should be a portion of the decision-making process as things are developed, because they may be bringing in income but are they really costing us money?
Yes. That reminds me of two things. One, you're talking about more exposure or something. There's actually a better group. It's called Strong Towns, and it's a plug for them. It's a national group that kind of talks about these issues. They do even, they're very sophisticated in the way they talk about it, right? Great articles, great websites. Maybe we should get them to come here and give a talk, right?
And just start following them.
Yeah. Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Strong Towns?
Strong Towns. But, they I don't know if it applies in all situations. They like to use the word sometimes Ponzi scheme. Like when you're saying, oh, we're getting some money, but really what we're getting is liabilities we can't afford to pay. It's kind of harsh term to use, but it's kind of what happens with these types of suburban developments. They will never generate enough money to maintain themselves. So.
In your research for this presentation, did you come across any communities that have ordinances or things on the books that would encourage infill as opposed to new development?
I have not in recent years done that. So I'm sure there's cutting edge stuff that are contemporary developed things that I'm just not aware of. I know there's researchers at the College of Architecture and Planning, Urban Planning Department, Architecture Department, even landscape that explore those issues, and I'm sure I could get you connected with a few. I think even John West is back there today.
This question of are there places that are doing this well and what are the rules and practices in those places, we don't have to drive that far to see communities that have made different choices over the last 30 years. Fort Wayne intentionally concentrated development in their downtown area. They pulled businesses away from the major highway where the city was tending to sprawl towards, and they offered incentives for them to be in the downtown area. And then once you have one big business downtown, other big businesses see that the workers that are there, they want to have access to that too. So now you have this agglomeration effect, which is another way of saying businesses like to be next to other businesses that have a pool of good workers. And if you go to the specific question about regulations in infill, we had a guy come down from South Bend who was talking about their pre-approved infill housing project where any developer can come in and reduce the cost for developing a new piece of land, for developing a new property on a urban piece of land that was going to be reused. They just have to follow a certain design guidelines so that it looks like the rest of the neighborhood. This is you automatically have a variance if you choose one of the designs that they've pre-approved, right? Am I thinking about right?
That's right.
Yeah. But the thing about those other communities, if you go to Fort Wayne and you look at the archives of their planning department, they came up with those plans in the late 80s. And every administration, every political administration that was in Fort Wayne from the mid-80s to the present has supported a vision for how their community ought to go and change. And the continuity comes because it's the same people who are working in their planning department, maybe moving from the city to the county, maybe moving over to the Chamber of Commerce side. But it's the same people, and they have the same vision. And so in addition to having like wonderful presentations like Colby, you have people who are taking their paycheck from city, county government and doing presentations like this in the community every day. And suffering the slings and arrows of people who disagree with them, and understanding the political landscape, understanding the laws, and how do we move towards our vision. Communities that are successful in getting closer to a vision of what they want to be, they have, they have public servants who do that work over long periods of time. And we have wonderful public servants here in Muncie, but the number that we have, and this is, you all should know that
the chair of the planning department, so this is the most self-interested thing I'll say. But we don't have enough folks who are getting paid enough in Muncie and Delaware County to move forward a single vision of what this community should look like. Instead, we rely on our elected officials who are wonderful people, have great ideas, but they're on a term of however they're elected, however long they're elected. So, yay, urban planning. Yeah, these are, I will just tell one story and then I'll stop. I worked for a planning agency in Chicago, and we had a team of, this is a big city, we had a team of 100 people whose job it was to take information like this and go out to communities and talk to them about it over and over again. And we go out to suburban areas and we would say you need more density, and people would get mad at us. And then we go back 5 years later when their taxes were not what they wanted them to be, and maybe they were more willing to listen. But over decades, people's perceptions and choices change. And you have to have the staff. You have to have a staff of an institution that's persistently pushing that vision. And that's the end of my soapbox. Thank you very much, Colby. This is amazing. And we need more of this.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else?
I was going to say one of the biggest problems with more development, one of the biggest hurdles that you have to accomplish, and you talked about it a little bit, like automobiles were a huge force factor in like how development has happened since the last 60 years. That's one of the biggest issues we have to overcome now. It's like in the ordinance, in the developing like world, you're limited by what you can build based on parking. So that's some of the issues, and I don't know, with higher density, how do you eliminate the need for parking respectively without having like too many issues at the variance board meetings where you're like, I'm asking for a huge reduction so we can do infill housing. And that's why I think it's cool about what Fort Wayne did when they have approved designs, because they automatically give you some variance. But I guess the question is like, how do you incentivize that type of development where it's like, we're going to give you, maybe the redevelopment commissions will say, we'll give you money towards the development, but we'll also allow you to do reduced variances for parking or land use, because that seems to be the largest hurdle on our end as a developer when we're designing and looking at the next project or whatever. It's kind of the biggest issue we ran into. I mean, a good example of that is the YMCA downtown Muncie. That's more of a recent one, but they wouldn't have built a $30 million facility in Muncie had they not gotten a parking variance. And so it's like, how do you have that when other developers are planning to come here or local developers trying to build here? Those are some of the hurdles you overcome. So you're right, like working with the local government to like, I think they need to be a part of these conversations because they need to like broaden their eyes like of some of the issues that cause development not to happen.
Absolutely.
And to go off that, parking is the most difficult hurdle to overcome, especially in this county here, where you're really not limited by code or there's really no limiting restrictions, and it's not difficult other than to overcome parking.
I mean, yeah.
You could build on a quarter acre, you could build thoughtfully, you could build 10 townhomes or more, roughly, but you're not going to be able to do that because you don't have the parking to allocate to the residents. So, yes,
well,
parking is definitely a big thing, but then the other thing you have to consider as a developer is, would I take 20 acres where I can put in my little roads and cul-de-sacs and I can set up all my crews and watch them build until that project's done, or do I do a lot of infill stuff? And as a project manager, I got to go to this side of town and make sure my drywallers showed up here, and make sure everything's going over here. So a lot of times we sacrifice doing probably the right thing, what's better for the community over what's easier and cheaper.
Yeah.
And on the front end.
Yes.
On the front end. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's because developers have a product that it's just like any like Target or AMC, like they know what that model looks like, so to go and build that somewhere, and they know exactly what they're gonna get. Like, so it's just a matter of like, does it fit? Like a lot of these bigger corporations will say like, does Muncie justify, based on their population, our product? And then we can go build it there, we'll buy land and build it there. Versus like, oh, they have existing structure somewhere, can we utilize that? It's an unsafe thing for them to do.
And you do have to build so big to start to take advantage of the government subsidies that come along with that development. So, again, that's why there is missing middle housing, right?
Yes. And
Sometimes it just takes a little bit of thoughtful awareness of the project site. I live on the block that faces High Street, and the other side of my block faces South Walnut, where there's the huge hill. And all the parking on that street is on the other side of the street. We had an empty lot that was used for one of the new infill houses. I was super excited about that. Except for I went to the city council several times to talk to them about what were they doing about parking for that particular house, because I own an empty lot, one house over, specifically because we have such parking problems. Part of it, you guys probably think I bought it because I wanted green space, which is a little bit, but literally the biggest reason I bought that lot is we have so much parking issue on that side of our block, because not one house on that side of the block that faces Walnut has one car attached to it. Most of them have two. One of the houses at that point had 4. And every one of those houses had a little garage that backed up to the alley that maybe one of the cars fit in. And we have a massive issue with where those cars are parking all the time. The back end of my lot holds 4 cars, and it's specifically for a couple of mine. And then there's 2 spots that if my neighbors need them, they can park in that solely to solve that. And I would go all the time during that project before they started building and saying, how much parking are you allotting for? Because if you're allotting for 1 car, in a world where there's going to be a family with 2 adults, and I've got money I never have in my life, there's going to be 2 cars, and all they had to do was widen the pad by about 4 feet for these people not to be parking one of their cars now half off the pad and half in their yard, which is now what is happening, or they're constantly rotating the car from down on Walnut to up there because they have little kids and babies that are loading into their cars. And all it would have taken was a little tiny bit of, each site is different, but also how wide do we really, like, just to accommodate? So sometimes the parking thing is just a little bit of that too. Also just being aware of, if you tell people they have to put 3 trees on every lot, whether that lot can hold 3 trees, they should plant the tree 3 feet from their house. So, but sometimes it's just awareness of that actual site. Like, here's parameters for your project, but does it fit the actual site that you're putting it on? And how can we switch that a little bit?
Okay. Colby, a few things. One plug for next month. It's about 90% land sure that we're going to be presenting on some tax sale research we've been doing in-house at Land Bank, John and Zach and I. And it's concluding a 10-month study. So we want to present that to the public. So please come back for the June 1st Friday. Just a few other plugs. The discussion about pre-approved designs, that's something that Tom Collins to the Architecture Department, Ball State, has gotten some funding. And with the land bank, we're trying to start a little bit of a pilot. Just try to get that conversation going, because that's been something that there's been energy around from lots of different people. And so we're hopefully working on that a little bit in the fall. And also I'd say the land bank, we're still a small organization, limited resources, but this idea of infill, rehabbing what can be salvaged is a big part of our mission. That's kind of what's happening. the old West End, rehabbing what we can, and then building infill on vacant lots, that, again, properties that have been just kind of distressed and dilapidated, going through the tax sale for years and years and years. And now we've got a big pilot going, which was, because of collaboration with city, county, nonprofits, philanthropy. I think anything that's going to make an impact anywhere is going to take, real collaboration, a lot of creativity. That's one of the things that we hope that this little project, the Old West End, is actually, it's not little, it's one of the largest infill projects that's happened once, I think, in a long, long time. But anything like that in places that are distressed is going to take tremendous amounts of effort and collaboration. I think this kind of thought is something that new to urban planning, like I've been hearing some about. You mentioned strong towns. I'm familiar with it a little bit. These are the kinds of things that I hear through my connection with the urban planning department. But I really applaud you for your work of contextualizing it to Muncie. I mean, and I go back to also what John was saying about you really just got to, we have to prioritize some planning and some resources for our decision makers. So I think that's something that we need, as a community, we can decide. I don't know, it takes some planning to get that to happen, but that's something that I think would be a huge benefit to our city. And to a degree, land bank, again, on a small scale, we're trying to do some support. We've got some dashboards, we're creating information. Zach is, brilliant and doing an amazing job, but he's basically a planner. And we're paying him. He's also a co-land bank director, but does it all. But anyways, that's what it takes. It takes some resources. And I'm glad you mentioned it, Colby, because it is about planning, it is about economics, it is about, but it's also about values. And I feel like when I kept seeing that, those circles radiating out to northwest, made me think that so to a degree, the vision that's driving Muncie is, and this may sound a little bit harsh, but it's almost kind of like, letting the south and east just kind of start to go away. And kind of thinking, and again, there's reasons, it's not nefarious, I think, that those things are happening. But those are the backs of Muncie, it was built on. And I think also that being part of the conversation, like South and East is part of Muncie too. And I really, really believe that the well-being of Muncie depends so much on the North and South being a whole. And that's, again, it's kind of kumbaya, it's hard to do in practice. But I think as far as values and identity, that's got to be something that people have at the center when we're thinking about the long-term and better results.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for coming. See you in June.